My Rabbi told me that on his bar mitzvah, the day of his bar mitzvah, his grandmother took him aside and she told him what she considered that every Jewish boy needed to be told on the day of his bar mitzvah. And she said to him, of course in Yiddish, in the Yenevelt, in the world to come, they hit you with iron bars. Now, I'm not too sure how many bar mitzvah speeches contain that kind of information anymore. The idea of schar v'oinish, the idea that there's something called punishment, Gehinnom, is a subject which many mashgichim, most mashgichim in yeshivas anyway nowadays, shy away from. It's difficult for us to really have that mindset that our actions will be judged. And, we can go through our lives and really feel that things are okay and Hashem's a nice Hashem and He's not going to do anything too bad to me. Today is a day of Din, Hoshana Rabbah. It's a very serious day. The Zohar says that the Din of Rosh Hashanah, on Rosh Hashanah it's written, Yom Kippur it's sealed, and on Hoshana Rabbah the ptakim, the notes, the instructions for those people who will carry out the Din that we've all been judged by, those notes, those instructions are sent out. It's really in some way a last chance. And in a sense, Elul builds up to Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Sukkot builds up to Hoshana Rabbah. As I say, it's difficult for us to have a concept of approaching HaKadosh Baruch through fear. We feel that, things are okay. It reminds me of a story of somebody who jumped off the Empire State Building and somebody stuck his head out of the window and saw this guy plummeting downward, and he said, are you okay? He said, so far so good. And a person should have fear. Why don't we have? Why aren't we scared? Anybody who's read any of the Sforim, and of course these are the Sforim that in yeshivas they take down and they hide, because they're frightening books. They're frightening. But why can't we face the idea of din to the point where it becomes counterproductive? So I think one of the reasons is there's a thing called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological state whereby we want the nature of a human being, the nature of the human psyche is to desire and demand consonance, harmony between our actions and our beliefs. I'll give you an example. Let's say you see an advertisement for a car. This car looks beautiful. You go over there to the local car dealer. You take the car for a drive around town. It looks beautiful. It's very comfortable driving around, poodling around town. You buy the car. So you get this car, you take the car, and the first weekend you have the car, Sunday morning, bright and early. You drive up the coast, and you find this thing is about as comfortable as a board. Now you've got a problem here, because you bought a car which you believe to be a good car, and you believe that a good car means that it's comfortable, not just driving around town, but also on long journeys. So you have a conflict of beliefs here. On the one hand, a good car is a car that's comfortable long journey, and on the other hand, you have a car and you believe you bought a good car, and you have a car which is not comfortable. What do? Well, what you can do is you can play down the negative virtues of the car. You can say, well, I don't really go on long journeys too much, and on the other hand, it looks very nice and it's very good on gas. You can play up the positive values and live with it like that. Or what you can do is you can say, something, I bought a lemon. I'm going to get rid of this thing. This is a bad car. Now, usually what people do when they're faced with a situation where they have to change their beliefs or their actions is they'll change their beliefs. because it's much easier. A person would much rather change his beliefs than change what he does. Now, all of us believe we're good people. A person naturally believes that, it's even about Al Capone apparently, that he wrote on his deathbed that, you should know that really I'm a good person and life was just very tough for me. A person, even the biggest Rosha in the world, wants to believe that he's a good person. And on the other hand, he's faced with the fact that he's doing things which are not Beseder. So what does a person do? He plays down. He says, what I'm doing is really not so bad. I'm a good person. I'm a Jew. I keep mitzvahs. I go to shul. I daven. I'm okay. I do X, Y, and Z. Okay, but everybody does X, Y, and Z. And probably A, B, and C as well. So what does a person do? He hides behind this fake wall of security. Now, if you look at the Mesilas Yesharim, when he talks about Zehirus means care or watchfulness. I think really you can sum up what the Mesilas Yesharim says in one word: think. Think. Now, it's interesting, he starts off by saying that when a person has to start thinking about what is it that he's doing wrong, he should first of all analyze what is the true good that a person should embrace, run towards with all his power, and what, on the other hand, is the true evil that a person should run away from it as though it was a burning fire. And once he's done that, he should fit his actions into one of those two categories. The obvious question is, why do you have to go through this preliminary stage? Why don't you, first of all, just sit down and say, now, what am I doing good? Am I doing bad? So I think the answer is cognitive dissonance. I'm a good person. If I'm a good person, therefore what I do is good. Therefore, it's going to be very difficult for me to analyze and find anything that I'm not doing beseder, that I'm not doing properly. However, if you take somebody and then objectively say to them, okay, nothing to do with you, let's just have a nice, intellectual, objective discussion. What is good? What is bad? Okay, what is good? This is good. It's good to daven properly. It's good to say brachas with kavanah. It's bad to speak lashon hara. It's bad not to be careful in kashrus. It's bad to be cruel to people. It's bad not to be makpid in things like shatnez. Okay, fine. Now let's go through. When was the last time you checked your suit? What did you say about Mrs. So-and-so the other day? So once a person, so to speak, locks himself into a pre-arranged series of ideas as to what is good and what is bad, he finds it much more difficult to wiggle out through cognitive dissonance. Given that, it's still very difficult for us to face that we don't do things which are beseder. And as I said, today marks the end of the process of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Hoshana Rabbah, the night of Hoshana Rabbah, a time where we have to be taking stock as though it was a Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. Sometimes things happen to you that bring you up short, that suddenly bring an idea into focus. We were adopted by two cats, and my little daughter, Rivka, decided that she wanted to keep these cats and started to feed them, and it got to the point where I wanted to get rid of the cats. They were just driving everybody crazy. So I managed, with the help of one of the bochrim here, to get one of the cats. One was like a tabby, a marmalade cat, and the other one's this black cat. And we got hold of the black cat, and I took it, and I thought, okay, I've got to get this cat very far away from its home, meaning us. So we drove it all the way to the other side of French Hill, across the main road to just the border of Isawiya, the Arab village over there, and we let it free over there. And I got back home, and my little daughter Rivka, she said to me, Daddy, look, I know the black cat had to go because he was scratching people, but please could we hold on to the marmalade cat? And I felt like this stormtrooper that had suddenly sort of wrenched this poor cat, and I suddenly thought to myself, this black cat woke up in the morning and it thought to itself, it's another day. There's another day with the family, Sinclair, with the same nice tuna going to be served for the afternoon meal. Everything is fine. This cat woke up with absolutely no idea that by the afternoon it would find itself on the other side of town completely by itself. And it suddenly hit me. Mi yanuach, mi yanua. Who's going to be comfortable? Who's going to have rest? And who's going to have to wander, stray? A little thing like that suddenly brought it into focus. This is Erev Rosh Hashanah. My Rabbi told me when he was in America, he used to drive a car for some reason or other. He was sitting at this traffic light, and he doesn't to this day know why it was. He drove through the red light. He was sitting next to, he saw there was this police car sitting next to him, and he doesn't know what happened. He just drove through the red light. Had a momentary. So, of course, the cop pulled him over and he said, "Hey, Rabbi, I got to give you a ticket." I mean, Rabbi, what can I do here? So, he wrote him out this, and of course it was more, he had to make an appearance in court. Going through a red light, apparently, it wasn't just you pay your $50, $100, you have to appear in court. So the court appearance was fixed. It was sometime before Rosh Hashanah, and he had this court appearance 2 weeks later. And he said that, like every moment that his mind was just spinning around on neutral, and he wasn't actually involved in something, he would go back to this projected court appearance. And he would think, if the judge says to me this, so I'm going to say that. And if he says that, I'm going to say this. And if he says this, then I'm going to say that. He had this whole, prearranged defense worked out for himself, depending on whatever the judge was going to say to him. And he thought to himself, hang on a second, this is a $150 silly, lousy, excuse my language, $150 parking ticket. And I'm going to so much care and preparation. Do I really give even half as much thought as this to Rosh Hashanah? Do I really think to myself, if they say to me, why did you do this? I'll say this. And it brought it home to me. How much do we really think about our defense? Because today is the day when those tickets are sent out, not the parking tickets either. It's difficult sometimes. We all know there was a story I heard about a younger man, a young fellow in Kollel. And Rosh Hashanah came round and he was davening. And he couldn't work up any enthusiasm. He was just saying the words. We've all had that feeling, probably more than once. And he came out for the Kiddush. A lot of shuls, they have a Kiddush before Musaf, before the Tekiyas, before the blowing of the shofar. And there was his wife and his 3 little children. And he suddenly thought to himself, their lives are depending on me. And he said he went back inside and he davened like he'd never davened in his life. Today's our last opportunity. We have to wake ourselves up. Vitzler Petterberg, in his Sefer Koch Ve'or, it's a Musa Sefer, he says that the Ikka, the main point of tshuva, as we know, tshuva has various components. Aziva Sechet, stopping doing the sin, Charata, regret, Kabbalah ala Asid, an acceptance, a promise to change, not to repeat our bad actions, and of course vidui, verbal confession. Now, he says something very interesting. He says the essence of tshuva. Now, if I was to ask myself, what is the essence of tshuva? So we'd probably say either aziva sechet, stop doing what's wrong, or Kabbalah ala Asid, I'm making a resolution to change my ways, to do something in a different way. He says no. The essence of tshuva is charata, regret. Now, obviously, the way Rav Yitzchak Petterberg understands charata is not the way that you and I usually think of charata. We think of charata as, well, that was really bad. I really feel bad about that. I really wish I hadn't done that. Do you know something? That costs you absolutely nothing. Of course you feel bad that you didn't learn more. Do I feel I didn't learn as much as I should have done last year? Yes. Doesn't cost me anything. I feel bad, fine, I feel bad. That's not what he's talking about. A real charata has to be connected to the consequences. If a person goes in to see his doctor and he's smoked for 40 years, and the doctor says, your lungs are shot, your lungs are like jelly, black jelly. That's charata. That's charata. A person who suddenly realizes what he's done, that he's killed himself, that's charata. So a person can only really have any kind of tshuva if he has an understanding. The charata is a realization of what it is that I've done, that the spiritual desert that I've created for myself. Like for a person, Lashon Hara, Lashon Hara is a terrible thing. I really wish I hadn't listened to Lashon Hara last year. Fine. Everybody wishes they hadn't listened to Lashon Hara. That's not charata. Charata means when I'm standing there on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I say to myself, you know something? If I listen to Lashon Hara, I'm going to go deaf in one ear. That's charata. Now when I listen to Lashon Hara, there's some kind of, my Kabbalah is a Kabbalah, my Azivas Achet is an Azivas Achet. As I say, this is something, these ideas, to really connect ourselves with the fact that our actions have serious ramifications. And to think, if I listen to Lashon Hara, maybe I'll lose my hearing. If I speak Lashon Hara, maybe I'll get a herpes on my mouth. Now, of course, if you read any of the Sifrei Yira, you're going to get much more than a herpes on your mouth. But for us to start entertaining the ideas that they talk about in those books, I think is counterproductive because we're on such a low level. But at least we could think, something, if I speak Lashon Hara, I'll get a herpes. That much all of us could do. Or if the Bittul Zman that I've done, I've wasted time, so maybe Hashem will take my time away from me in some other way. Maybe, God forbid, I'll have to spend time in hospital. If a person puts some kind of understanding of consequences to his actions, then it becomes much more productive, that his tshuva is much more real. As I say, these are ideas that are rarely spoken about in Shmuzin by mashgichim because we're very far away from them. Maybe a little bit we could at least think to ourselves along these lines. The other side, and probably the side that's much easier for us to address and benefit from, if you look at the davening of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, almost all of it is talking about Malchus Shemayim, coronating the king. True, there's a little bit about Tshuva on Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is kimat, except for the insertions, I think it was by the Goinim in the Tefillah, Zachrein L'chaim, which according to some opinions really shouldn't be there anyway because there are interruptions in the prayer. But apart from those few insertions, it's all about Malchus Shemayim, the king. It's difficult for us to have a concept of kingship because we live in a world where everything is yarud, everything has gone down. You go into a restaurant nowadays, an exclusive restaurant, and the guys who are eating the food are wearing the torn jeans and the ones serving them are wearing the suits. There's very little idea of majesty. I remember in my short life how as a very young boy, one of my first memories was watching the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. It was one of the first things I think that they put on television after the war. I'm talking about 1953 now. And I remember sitting there in front of this, you couldn't even really call it a television, this sort of murky grey fishbowl. And, they were up there in the church, and they were going up and down, and the pomp and the ceremony and the sense of the grandeur of it all was we were riveted, looking at this little fishbowl for hour after hour. The echo of majesty is has really almost completely vanished from our world. Rav Dessler says, the only reason that kings exist is so that the Jewish people, we, Klal Yisrael, may have the most distant echo, the most distant glimmer, scintilla of an idea of what Hamelech Malchei Amlochim is. That's the only reason they exist. And it's interesting, says Rav Dessler, that as the world turned away from God, where atheism became something which was not just individuals who lost their emunah, but became a movement, an idea. So similarly, concomitantly and parallel to that, so the power of kings waned in the world. Meaning, while the world in general believed in a supreme being, they were given an echo of that supreme being. When the world in general turned away from the idea of a God, so the kings themselves shrunk, until nowadays they've become basically a tourist attraction. Except, interestingly enough, in a few places. For example, over there in Arabia, kings still have the power of life and death. Very few other kings that I can think of do. And we see that the Arabs, one of the things that they do have is a tremendous Yirah Shamayim. They may be crazy, but they're tremendously strong believers. Their belief is difficult to question. And because they have such a strong belief, so maybe it is that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu has left them with kings, real kings. I once thought that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, here we are, Klal Yisrael, Hashem's people. Where's the Beis HaMikdash? We're standing in shuls, however nice the shuls are, they're but a pale shadow of what used to be. We're in exile. I don't know if you're aware of this, but during the war, the Second World War, the French government escaped from Paris, and the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, established a puppet regime in Paris. And they would broadcast to the French people to try and give them strength. And I remember hearing this how they actually broadcasted to them. They come on, and there was this timpani drum, which would start off the broadcast going dum 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 dum, dum 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 dum. Now, if you know Morse code, that's the V, and then the voice would say, "The night is your friend, the V is your sign." I remember this is like from the war. I wasn't alive in the war, but I remember hearing this on the tape after the war, and I had this picture of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Lahavdil, that it's like if you can imagine in France, there were these people who would gather around this primitive radio. They'd uncover it. Of course, to have a radio, they'd be put to death immediately. And they'd listen to the sound of the voice of the king in exile, giving them strength. And I feel like sometimes on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's like we gather around in secret around this little radio in some farmhouse, some farm out there in the middle of France, where they would uncover this radio and listen to it in secret. And that's who we are, the Jewish people, listening to this broadcast from our king in exile. So much so as the glory of Hashem vanished from the world. We have a father. We have a tati. The Yalkut Shimoni, the famous Yalkut Shimoni, speaks about 4 kinds of Jews who are parallel to the 4 minim, the Daled Minim. The Esrog is a Jew who has Torah and mitzvahs. The Esrog smells nice and it tastes nice. The smell is the smell of Maisim Tovim, of good deeds. The taste is the taste of Torah. Lulav, palm tree, dates taste very nice, there's no smell. Hadassim, the smell is beautiful, there's no fruit, there's no taste. That's the Jew who has good deeds and no Torah. And the Arava has absolutely nothing. No taste, no smell. That is the Jew who has neither taste nor smell, neither good deeds nor Torah. And yet without that Jew, you do not have the Daled Minim. Without that Jew, if you remember, we daven on Erev Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre, to be able to pray together with the Avaryanim, the sinners. Why? Because just like Yom Kippur is not Yom Kippur without Gans Klal Yisrael, all of Klal Yisrael. And the chelbana, the smell, the foul stench of that spice, which is an essential part of the Ketores, and without that, the Ketores is possible. There's no Ketores without the chelbana, and there's no Daled Minim without the Arava. Fine. Hoshana Rabbah is a day in the Beis HaMikdash where they would take the Arava by itself and go 7 times around the Mizbeach. And of course, the minhag that we have of circling the bimah 7 times is the direct descendant of that mitzvah in the Beis HaMikdash. The question obviously arises, why the Arava? If we were going to choose one of the species to exalt, to give it its own day, the day of the Arava, we'd say, why not give it to the Esrog? The Esrog has Tam, the Esrog has Reach, the Arava. The Arava? Why the Arava? There's a medrash that says that the Kodesh Baruch Hu showed Moshe Rabbeinu all of the storehouses of schar, of reward, for the tzaddikim in Shemayim. Moshe Rabbeinu came across this vast storehouse, and he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for whom is this storehouse, this tremendous treasury of reward? And Hashem said, that is for people, those who have nothing. What does it mean that a person has nothing? Today, the day of Hoshana Rabbah, is the Ushpiza of David HaMelech. David HaMelech had no life of his own, had nothing of his own. Adam HaRishon says in the Sfarim was supposed to have 1,000 years of life. He gave 70 years of his life to David HaMelech. David HaMelech had nothing of his own. And that is why David HaMelech, it says, Ani tefillah. David HaMelech is tefillah. What is the essence of tefillah? A person approaches HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says, Ona Hashem Hoshiana, save me. Why? Because I have nothing. I don't have Maisim Tovim. I don't have Torah. I have no merits. A person who comes to Hashem and says, Hashem, I have nothing. I misbattle myself to you. He is the one who is Zoicher for the greatest reward. A person comes to Hashem with Torah, he gets rewarded for his Torah. A person who comes to Hashem with his Maisim Tovim, he gets rewarded for his Maisim Tovim. A person who comes to Hashem and says, Hashem, I have nothing except my tshuka, nothing except my yearning to be close to you. Ani tefillah, that's the essence of tefillah. That's the essence of Hoshana Rabbah. For him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens up that storehouse. And that's the storehouse that we have to plug in today. That is what the avoda of the day is to I am nothing but my desire to be close to you, Hashem. I need tefillah. And that's why the Arava thirsts for water. That's its milah, that's its tchuna, its nature. That desire, that feeling, I have absolutely nothing. And whatever I may have is absolutely, all I have is my desire to be close to Hashem. That is Hoshana Rabbah. You're my father. You're my father, Hashem. Like a child approaches his father, and he approaches his father not because I'm a good boy, not because I do what I'm supposed to do, because you're my tati. Tati, you're my father. You're my father. And what a father we have. The essence of Malchus, and if you think about it, somebody once told me you can always tell who are the good bochrim in yeshiva, because if they do something wrong, they'll say to you, look, Rabbi, please, you can punish me any way you want, but please, just don't tell my parents. When a person has a feeling about his father, I love my father. Why do I love my father? Not because he does things for me. Of course, he does things for me, but that's my tati. It's my tati. If you think to yourself of somebody, your father or somebody that you think about your father and think, why do you love your father? It's my father. If you think that, good kids always talk about their parents. In my house, we used to do it this way. My father used to do this. My father used to say that. If you look at the Hasidim, the way the Hasidim talk about their Rebbe, oh, my Rebbe did this. You want to see the way the Rebbe, oh, wow. That is the feeling that a person should have. That is what it means to be Mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To have that feeling, my Tati, he loves me. And because he loves me, I love him. Abba Rabba Avtanu. And a person connects into that, that's the other way of tshuva. The tshuva me'ava. I have a friend of mine, he told me that he was becoming frum in New York City. And he used to go to davening. And he used to borrow one of the kippot at the entrance to the shul. And he figured one day that he should, go and get his own couple, his own kippah. So he went into this Jewish bookstore in Midtown Manhattan. He walked in there. And down at the other end of the shop, he saw there's this carousel of Jewish religious headgear. So he walked down there and he said, there was all kind. There was knitted ones, and there were green ones, and crocheted ones, and ones that looked like they came off the head of an Afghan shepherd. And for no particular reason, he picked up this big black couple, velvet, and he plonked it on his head, paid for it. He went out into the street, and he said, the world had changed. Everything had changed. He suddenly realized, I've become an ambassador. I'm an ambassador for the Ribbono Shel Olam, for my Tati. And everything that I do now is going to reflect on him. And if I push in line in the store, in the checkout line, people aren't going to say anymore, who's this guy pushing in the line? They say, who's this Jew pushing in the line? Or if I get up for an old lady on the subway, if old ladies still venture onto the subway, I'll be Makadosh Shem Shemayim. We don't realize how much rides on this little bit of cloth perched on the top of our heads, because we are the ambassadors of Hashem. And we think about Hashem, we think about the love of Hashem. That brings a person to tshuva. I remember the Rambam says that a person shouldn't think too much about the coming of Mashiach, because he says, Af echad yodea ma yiyeh ad sheyiyeh. Nobody knows exactly what's going to be until it will happen. But if one is allowed a little dream, a little reverie, so I have mine, and it goes something like this. I remember standing in Yom Kippur, and as you know, at the end of Yom Kippur, there's a final long blast on the shofar, a Tekiah Gedola. And of course, the Baal Tekiah, the person blowing the shofar, does his very best to make that Tekiah as loud and as strong as it can be. So I suddenly had this thought to myself, as he started to blow this Tekiah, that he starts to blow this Tekiah and starts off very strong, and it gets louder and louder and louder and louder, and now everybody's looking at each other going, wow, this guy's got a pair of chops on him, and it's getting louder. And then there comes a moment, and then the chandeliers start to shake, and the dust of ages starts to fall to the floor, and the walls are starting to vibrate. Everybody now realizes that the shofar is not being played by this fellow. The shofar is is playing him, it's playing itself. And this shofar gets louder and louder, and the sound goes out into the street until the entire street, the entire world is now sounding this long Tekiah Gedola, and everything in the creation is saying, Hashem Echad. It's a reverie, it's a dream. But if one can be allowed a little dream, that's how I see Mashiach coming. 2 ways to tshuva. It's never too late. And as we said, tonight and tomorrow are the days when those pitakim were sent out. Interesting, the Chasam Sofer, he has a different, apparently must be a different idea, because the Chasam Sofer in the year that he died, he died just before Shoshana Rabbah, I believe. And he said to those people he gathered around him before he passed from this world, he said, I managed to get through the din of Rosh Hashanah, I managed to get through the din of Yom Kippur, but I'm not going to get through the din of Hoshana Rabbah. Which means, has to be understood, he obviously understood the concept of Hoshana Rabbah differently to the normal idea, that it's written, sealed, and sent out, meaning, l'choyer, it's all one din. He understood there are actually 3 dinim. But whichever way you understand it, today is a crucial day. A day where a person should be frightened. A day when a person should rouse himself. A day where he should feel it's not too late. Maybe I can take a Kabbalah upon myself to be more careful in Lashon Hara. Maybe I can say to myself, you know something, I have a brother-in-law, in their family, they have a thing, whenever anybody starts to speak Lashon Hara, somebody starts to say, oh, you know something, I think it's going to rain later. To find a way of diverting the conversation. And to think to yourself, I have charata about the Lashon Hara that I'm going to hear and that I heard in the past. Because maybe that's going to mean I'm going to lose my hearing. That's something we can relate to. When we think of the punishments in Olam Haba, it's very difficult. Very difficult. But a person can think, if I speak Lashon Hara, maybe I'll lose the ability to talk, Khalila. If I look where I shouldn't look, maybe I'll get an infection in my eye. It's not too late for these things. And that's the side of Yira. It's a difficult side. And then there's the other side, there's the side of Ahava. I want to be close to Hashem. Because Hashem is a wonderful Hashem. And if a person stands there and he feels, he's my king, he's my tati, and he loves me. He loves me. And because he loves me, I want to love him. I want to reciprocate that love. To feel that, to really introspect into that. To think what a wonderful thing it is to be a Yid, to be a Jew, to be close to Hashem. I think the Kotzker Rebbe said that if a Jew understood what it meant to be a Ben Olam Haba, he'd run out into the street and start to do a Gezatzka, a Russian Cossack dance. He'd go Meshuggah. These things are far from us. But today is the day we have to reach out, try and be massig that idea. Hashem is my tati. I love Hashem. Just like we think about our father. If you conjure up a picture of your father, think, if he's still with you, but Hashem, how great your tati is. All the things you did together with him. Maybe you went fishing with him. How kind he was to you. I think of my father, Rishon. And I know it brings tremendous feelings of love, admiration. A person should transfer that feeling to think about Hashem in that way. He's my tati. And these are things that brings a person closer to Hashem. One through Yira and one through Ava. I'll finish with a story. Somebody, we said on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we said in several places, but in Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu aseh lemancha im lo lemanenu. Avinu Malkeinu Afinu, our Father, our King, Tati. Aseh lemancha, do it for your sake, if not for ours. Somebody once asked Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman, shall be strong and well. What's pshat? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, do it for your sake, if not for ours. Why? What does it mean? So he told him a story about a French businessman who lived in Paris. Apparently this businessman lived one floor down from an Arab businessman. And this Arab fellow, they got friendly, they got on very well together. It turned out that this fellow was actually the cousin of the King of Morocco. Subsequently, he found out that the King of Morocco was coming to visit his cousin and would be staying in the apartment. And he said to him one day, he said, wow, you know, I've never actually met a king. Do you think it would be possible? Could I just come in and say hello? So he said, well, I'll see. So he gets a phone call a couple of days later, and he says, okay, come down, the king is here now, come down straight away now. So he walks into the living room, he takes one look at the king, and he says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shenosan michvodo lebosav adam. Blessed are you, Hashem, who has given of his honor to flesh and blood. And the king looked at him and said, okay. So he said, Your Majesty, I am a Jew. And in our tradition, when we see a king, we praise, we bless him that God has seen fit to give of his honor to flesh and blood. We bless him. The king says, oh, it's very interesting. We start to talk. Talk for a few minutes, very nice, polite conversation. And the king then says, well, you know, I have to go now. I'm very busy. I'm a king. So this Jewish fellow says, Your Majesty, it's been such an honor to talk to you. I wonder if it's not to impose. This next Saturday morning, we are holding something called a bar mitzvah. My son is becoming 13 years of old. He's going to become a man in the eyes of Jewish law. It would be the most incredible honor if you could just put your head round the door. He said, I'm very sorry. Yes, I won't be able to do that. But, you know, something I've enjoyed speaking to you. And I'd like to give a present, if that's acceptable. He said, very nice. So the king flicks his fingers, his equerry brings across his checkbook. He opens up the checkbook, he writes out a check, gives it to this Jewish businessman. The businessman opens the check, 25,000 euro. He said, Majesty, this is $100 would have been more than enough. The king looks at him and he says, you don't understand. I'm a king. I can't give you less than that. We say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lo l'maneinu l'mancha. If it's not for our sake, do it for yours, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because anything less than to forgive us and to write us all in the book of a good year of life and health and spiritual growth, anything less than that is not worthy of you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bless us all with a good year, a good gebenched year. And Hashem should hear all our tefillahs, us and all of Klal Yisrael.